Roy Keane is implying that Sir Alex Ferguson is heavily involved in all the processes at United. I think you're hearing different, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess my take would be United have 99 problems and Fergie ain't one. Bit corny. No, just, well, yeah, 999. Look, the long and the short of it is, he's seen on television when the camera pans to the stands, but the days of him being closely involved are gone. He's not even paid by the club anymore. He's there because, as Sam writes in the piece, he's an 84-year-old man who's following a football club that he loves, and in that time since retiring, I don't think he's barely made a pronouncement about the state of the first team, what kind of job the manager's doing. There's an interesting piece by Paul Hayward, who knows Ferguson very well. He wrote his autobiography, one of his autobiographies. Points out that Fergie's union background means that he was very conscious of not being seen like Matt Busby was seen, as interfering with managers. His presence is there as a symbol of what United used to be, and that's the issue, not his actual involvement. But Roy Keane knows how to put a tackle in, doesn't he? And that comment was classic Roy. Obviously, their animus goes back to Roy leaving the club in 2005, and perhaps opinions that I don't think Roy's ever going to budge from. But this isn't about Matt Busby's situation. For one thing, the Busby situation was he was a sort of intimidating presence to sort of novice managers or kind of managers that were seen as not big characters. But United have had some of the biggest characters in the dugout. They've had Mourinho, they've had Van Gaal, they've had strong character like Amram himself, pretty stubborn guy. The thought that Fergie is there kind of influencing them or intimidating them is just one of Roy's TV moments, but I don't think reality.
Miguel, Johnny mentioned Paul Hayward's piece there. In The Observer, it says one call to Sir Alex exposed the deep malaise at the heart of Manchester United. And talking about that call that Fletcher made, he says when Fletcher tapped Ferguson's number on his phone screen, the call travelled across all the waste of the last 13 years to the genius behind 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups and 2 Champions Leagues. It resurrected the principle that Ferguson might have something useful to say about what should happen next. And he did, by articulating something the Glazers and parts of the Ineos ownership don't understand. The job now, is what he said to Darren Fletcher, is to do what's best for Manchester United. What Manchester United are doing at the moment is bringing in an interim in Darren Fletcher, talking about bringing another interim after Darren Fletcher before appointing a permanent manager in the summer. Is that what is best for Manchester United?
Yeah, definitely. Also, it gives them the kind of space to actually think about this clearly, which I think really is required. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues of the modern Manchester United, and this feeds into a lot of themes of the show today, I think they've got to decide what they actually want to look like as a club. And I mean, like in terms of, especially with one so obsessed with identity, it doesn't really have a football identity. And if you pick one, and this is essential in modern football, then everything flows from that. And that was one of the issues of the Amram appointment, that really in the summer of 2024, and there is context for this because the new leadership was coming in, key figures weren't in place, but in the summer of 2024 they really should have taken it almost as starting from scratch and thinking about what do we want this team to look out. Instead they ended up, I suppose, clumsily persisting with Ten Hag for some justifiable reasons, and then going for Amram, who's probably more wedded to a specific style than any modern coach, which kind of goes against that sort of best practice that we're talking about. And just like Sam touches on this in the piece there, or at least kind of, I think this is a little bit of what he's getting at. I think where the Ferguson thing is significant, I suppose, it's not about his influence, because I mean, I think compared to Busby, as Jonathan was saying, Busby was this kind of this almost ferocious presence there, even if it was kind of implicit. Whereas Ferguson by contract, it almost feels like he's kind of a cuddlier figure in retirement than he...
Busby had the office in the stadium. The manager could literally know that Samat's sitting two or three doors down.
And just on the kind of, I suppose where the phone call is significant is because, as a colleague said to me during the week, I won't out him, but he said, what would have happened if Ferguson said no?
Not for you, Darren.
Like, I mean, which kind of shows a little bit the absurdity of this, and it's like United are now in a position, and this is where there are echoes of kind of the 17 years between Busby, where they're looking for the next Messiah.
Yeah.
That are the next, and there's almost biblical themes to it.
Yeah.
Jackie, just on that, look, it looks like it's going to be either Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or Michael Carrick. There are two things at play here, aren't there? Who's the better coach and who's going to help Manchester United in that short term until the end of the season, but also from an optics perspective. And are they the same thing? Who would be the right choice at this stage?
Well, they tried Ole Gunnar Solskjaer more significantly, of course, than Carrick. So I would absolutely say Carrick out the two. It's weird, isn't it? Because Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson's not the problem here. He's the figurehead. He's the guy that brought so much success that has helped create and amplify the fan base that was already there. It was already a huge club, of course, before him. But what he did was extraordinary. Him sitting in the stands is not the problem. The problem is that it's been an absolute shambles ever since he left, with lurching from one style to another, to a different manager to another, and just going with no kind of serious clue as to what to do next. And it all comes from the top, doesn't it? And it wasn't just that Sir Alex Ferguson left, it was that David Gill left, and the way of doing things was exposed in their absence. And the fact that the first signings under David Moyes, the key ones, the likes of Fellaini from Everton and Juan Mata from Chelsea on a free, kind of low-hanging fruit, they really struggled to really kick off the whole process with a new identity from then, and they've not gone back to that. So in terms of the two managers, I would absolutely say Carrick, give him a go, because I don't see why you'd go back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But on the Sir Alex Ferguson, sorry, quite disrespectful, front, listening to Peter Schmeichel, legendary goalkeeper, the other day, who's saying that no, Sir Alex isn't involved at all. He speaks to him a lot, and he said he's not. He's just there in the stands, but he's not having a say at all in what's going on. And why shouldn't Darren Fletcher pick up the phone to him? It's getting ridiculous now. You can pick up the phone to whoever he likes. You're not going to not pick up the phone to somebody who's been there and seen and done it all.
Talking of Arsenal, Miguel, Sam Dean in the Sunday Telegraph, rather scathing piece on Victor Gyökeres. The headline is, Gyökeres is one of the worst strikers in the league. Here's the data to prove it. Arsenal are top of the Premier League and Champions League tables, but many supporters are growing increasingly concerned about the performances of star striker Victor Gyökeres, a £64 million signing. He pinpoints poor movement and unreliable touch, and he says it could be argued Gyökeres is occupying centre-backs, creating more space for other attackers, but the other strikers are now fit. So now Arteta will have a decision to make. Harsh or fair, this piece?
Well, to be fair to Sam, the piece is very fair and very measured. The headline is two-footed.
Yeah. And that's before you get the subtext, like unreliable touch, poor movement.
You only have to look at the goal return. There's an issue there. I've done a lot of Arsenal this season. I was there on Thursday night, and Thursday night I think was the most pronounced for me in that there were 3 times that the ball flashed across the box. I think particularly from a Timber header back was the one that really stands out to me. And Gyökeres was nowhere near it. It felt like he was 5 yards behind the play. We've seen a lot of, classic number 9s from Ian Wright to Gary Lineker talk about how if you're a striker in that sort of situation, you've actually got to gamble on your movement to put yourself in there. That is obviously an issue, especially given Gyökeres was signed as a more traditional number 9, not someone necessarily to kind of for his pressing game or for other elements. I think another issue with him, especially if we're comparing him to kind of classic number 9s in that way, is that there's maybe been some frustration with Arsenal when the ball goes up, it doesn't stick to him, and even you can sense, okay, not so much on Thursday night, although it was a different sort of game, but when Gabriel Jesus came on in recent games, there's just a different energy about Arsenal. That he feels like he integrates into the team more. And look, some of it is down to the fact, I would say, that he's adapting to a higher level from the Portuguese league to the Premier League. It's a new country, but he is 27. One of the reasons he was signed, and this came out in some of the kind of discussion from within Arsenal in the summer, that it was to win now. But even that was interesting at the time, because in the build-up to this summer, which was kind of like the summer of number 9s, and it's interesting that a lot of them are actually struggling, which maybe says something about how number 9s are still developing in the modern game. But for pretty much 18 months, the word from Arsenal it was Sesko they were looking at. They've done all the work on Sesko. That one of the reasons they were interested in Sesko as well is because, consistent with a lot of Arsenal's transfer recruitment, he was a player that could grow with the team, even if he wasn't the finished article. And now that did abruptly change in the summer, and I think there was even a surprise to other clubs that it was Gyökeres they went for and that Sesko was suddenly available.
Yeah, I think that's part of the switch to thinking win now. That's what this season's all about for Arsenal. All of the transfer business and the other stuff, it's this awareness of trying to win now, which is, Gyökeres. But Gyökeres was seen, as you say, as the guy that's going to win for you now, that's going to score your goals. His struggles haven't surprised me. I wrote about this in the summer, that the track record of those coming from Portuguese football goal scorers is pretty poor. Vicky van Wolfswinkel, 25 goals for Sporting Lisbon, I think 1 goal for Norwich, for example. Mario Jardel, you can go back. Brighton don't often get it wrong, and obviously they had Gyökeres and let him go. He's not one of the worst strikers in the league, though, because he's useful. He just doesn't look like a top club striker. But Sam hasn't written he's one of the worst strikers in the league, as you say. Yeah. He's just blah, isn't he?
Jackie, picking up on the points that Miguel made there.
He wants to be blah.
About Gyökeres.
Yeah.
Higher level, new league, first time he's going to be playing at that level. All of those issues have been pointed towards Benjamin Sesko as well, and we're seeing signs now that Benjamin Sesko might just be coming up to speed. Is that something that Arsenal could look at and think, just give Gyökeres a bit of time? Because if you are top of the Premier League and top of the Champions League group into the last 4 of the Carabao Cup as well, with a striker who has been a regular, surely you can't carry somebody up front for the entire season, can you?
Yeah, I don't think they're carrying him as such, and it's a good piece by Sam, and he watches Gyökeres very, very closely on a very regular basis. And I thought the key line in there, my Stato head on, was the fact that he didn't score a single header in scoring his all his goals last season. 68 and 66 in the league for Sporting is incredible. So you can see why they brought him in. But I think the key thing here, bigger picture-wise, is the fact that everyone at Arsenal is terrified, right? Not terrible. No, they're not terrible. They're terrified of blowing it. They are absolutely. You could see that against Liverpool, and when those fabulous balls were played into the box, I screamed at my kids like Gary Lineker, Michael Owen would be absolutely attacking that space. There was no excuse, and I don't even care what level, even non-league.
Andy Gray, Jackie, there you go.
Oh, there you go. Absolutely, but you don't even have to be the most technically proficient footballer, surely, to know you have to attack that space. When you've got quality deliveries from the likes of Timber, and they've got quality players all over the field to deliver those balls in, that's what really concerned me more than anything else. But I think the reason his name's coming up so much, yes, the stats are really poor, but it's because they are terrified of blowing it now at this stage, when this is obviously the best chance.
Mikel Arteta's work at Arsenal is being viewed in an even brighter light after the recent coaching shakeups elsewhere. With Chelsea parting ways with Enzo Maresca and Manchester United moving on from Ruben Amorim, the contrast is hard to miss. Arsenal has kept moving forward under Arteta, giving him time through difficult stretches, and now seeing the payoff as the club pushes again in the Premier League title race. It also raises a bigger question about strategy. While Chelsea and United are changing direction again, Arteta has been in place for more than 6 years, outlasting a long list of managers across those 2 clubs in that span. That stability has become part of the story, and it was a major talking point on the Seeing Red podcast with Tom Canton and John Cross. Beyond reacting to Amorim's dismissal and breaking down wins over Aston Villa and Bournemouth, plus Manchester City's loss to Chelsea, the conversation kept returning to one core idea: structure. Not just who is the coach, but how much power that coach has, and whether the club is built to support a long-term project. Cross pointed to Arsenal as a rare example of patience turning into real strength. He argued that Arsenal's willingness to back Arteta through the messy early phases helped create the stable position they're in now, and that this kind of time and support investment is what can turn a club into something truly solid. Canton's response was sharp and honest. Arteta's arc, he said, has almost become a problem for other clubs, because it tempts them to keep coaches they probably shouldn't. But at the same time, it's still the best example of what can happen when you hire the right person and actually give them time. And that time wasn't smooth. The discussion highlighted how Arsenal could easily have pulled the plug early. 2 8th-place finishes, then 5th, missing out on the Champions League, and a Europa League semi-final exit to Unai Emery's Villarreal. Any of those moments could have pushed a club into panic mode. Instead, the argument is that Arsenal recognized the bigger reality. Arteta didn't have the resources to compete at the required level right away. The squad needed a rebuild. The roster needed to be refreshed. That's where the comparison to Chelsea and United becomes even more pointed. The podcast suggested that recruitment and decision-making structure are often what determine whether a coach survives. If signings don't land, results suffer. And if a coach doesn't have enough influence or the club isn't aligned behind a clear plan, it becomes much easier for things to collapse. In other words, giving time only works if the coach is empowered to shape the team in a way that matches the vision. Cross also emphasized that Arteta's situation stood out because he pushed to be a true manager, not just a head coach. The idea is simple. Top coaches want a real say in the build, and they want the club to match what they were promised when they took the job. The discussion even pointed to how Arteta survived a low moment, like the home loss to Burnley, because the club stayed behind him. And in that period, with fan pressure affected by the COVID-era environment, Arsenal were able to hold their nerve instead of reacting emotionally. Meanwhile, the big unknowns now shift back to Chelsea and Manchester United. Who replaces Amorim? And how will the next chapter look at Chelsea? The answers may come sooner than people expect. But for Arsenal, the reality stays the same. They're stable, they're moving forward, and they're still in the title chase, while others are starting over again. And that contrast can shape how people judge every manager in the league. Because when two massive clubs hit the reset button again, it forces the same question Cross raised on the show. Is the quick switch actually fixing the problem, or just delaying the real work? The bigger takeaway from the discussion is that time isn't a magic solution by itself. It only becomes valuable when the club's structure supports the plan. And when the coach has the influence to push the squad in the direction he believes it needs to go. That's why the distinction between head coach and manager kept coming up. The podcast point is that if a coach is expected to own the results, he usually wants a meaningful say in the decisions that shape those results. And if he doesn't get that, patience alone won't save him. That's also where Arteta's early struggles get reframed. Those finishes and setbacks could have become a reason to panic. Instead, they became evidence of why alignment matters, because Arsenal chose to treat them as part of a build, not a final verdict. And once the squad was reshaped the way the club believed it needed to be, the results started to reflect that long-term approach. So the repercussions aren't just about Arsenal looking stable, it's about how stability changes your margin for error. When you don't reset every year, you're not constantly starting from zero. You're building on decisions, learning from setbacks, and keeping a clearer identity. For Chelsea and Manchester United, the immediate consequence is obvious. They're changing direction again, which means the next appointment carries even more weight. Because every new coach isn't just judged on results. He's judged on whether the club is finally giving him the structure and authority that the role demands. That's why the question at the end matters so much. Who will replace Amorim? And how will Liam Rosenior do at Chelsea? Because those answers will test the exact theme the show kept returning to. Time, support, structure, and control. And for Arsenal, it's a different kind of pressure. Stability doesn't guarantee trophies, but it does keep you in the fight longer. And right now, while others restart, Arsenal get to stay focused on what they're already doing, chasing the Premier League title.